Elias Tcherikower, Eliahu Tcherikower, Elias Tcherikower, I.M.Cherikover, was a Russian-born Jewish historian of Judaism of the Jewish people. Biography. Tcherikower was born and raised in Poltava, in the Russian Empire, where his father was a pioneer of the Hovevei Zion movement. He attended gymnasium in Odessa and went on to university in St. Petersburg. His participation in the Russian revolutionary movement led to his arrest at a Menshevik meeting during the 1905 revolution, after which he spent a year in prison. He published his first article, an essay in Russian on the Yiddish writer Sholem Yankov Abramovich, in 1905. In the Russian-language Zionist journal Evreiskaya Zhizn. For the next 10 years he wrote mainly in Russian. After 1915 most of his work was in Yiddish. Tcherikower contributed biographies and a variety of other articles to the Russian-language Jewish encyclopedia Evreiskaya Encyclopedia. He was also active in the Society for the Promotion of Culture Among the Jews of Russia, an educational and civic association founded in 1863. He edited the Society's journal and wrote a history of it that appeared in 1913. During the First World War, Tcherikower spent time in the United States, arriving in New York City in the summer of 1915. There he had contact with the socialist Zionist leader and Yiddish linguist Ber Borokov, who was a childhood friend, and under Borokov's influence, began to write in Yiddish for socialist and nationalist-oriented Yiddish journals and newspapers. He returned to Russia sometime after the outbreak of the revolution in 1917, and then in late 1918 moved to Kiev, in the newly independent state of Ukraine. At the time, under the Ukrainian People's Republic, ethnic minorities, including Jews, had been granted a degree of cultural and political autonomy. Tcherikower was active at the Volksverlag, one of several Yiddish publishing houses that operated in Kiev around this time. In the spring of 1919 a wave of anti-Jewish violence spread through the Ukraine, including Kiev, and Tcherikower turned his attention to gathering documentation of the events in the Jewish communities, leading the editorial board for collecting and investigating material pertaining to the pogroms in the Ukraine. Quote, among his collaborators were Noam Shtif, Jacob Leschinsky, Jacob Zev Wolflatsky Bertoldi, and Noam Gergel. The archive assembled by these scholars eventually served as the basis of several historical works in Yiddish about the events. When the Soviets gained control in the Urken in 1921, Tcherikower and other Yiddish activists in Kiev fled the city. He and his wife Riva, taking the archive with them, went first to Moscow and then to Berlin. A significant contingent of Russian Jewish artists and scholars similarly took up residence in Berlin in the early 1920s, including the scholars with whom Tcherikower had worked in Kiev, as well as the esteemed Jewish historian Simon Dubnow, whom Tcherikower regarded as a mentor. During this period several Yiddish and Hebrew publishing houses were established in Berlin, providing Tcherikower and his colleagues opportunities to publish scholarly works in Yiddish. In August 1925, at a conference held in Berlin, Tcherikower, along with Max Weinreich and Noam Shtif, was among the co-founders of the Jewish Research Institute YIVO, dedicated to East European Jewish history and culture. Although the institute initially had its central office in Berlin, much of its activities were centered in Vilna, which became its official headquarters within the following year. Tcherikower became the leader of the historical section of the new institute, which held its founding meeting on October 31, 1925 at Dubnow's apartment in Berlin. In 1926 to 1927, Tcherikower played a key role in the preparation of the defense of Sholom Schwartzbard, who was on trial in Paris for the assassination of the Ukrainian leader Simon Petliura, and who had allegedly acted in retaliation for Petliura's role in the pogroms carried out by Ukrainian forces in 1919. During the Russian Civil War. In this work, Tcherikower, assisted by his wife, brought to bear materials in the pogrom-related archive he and his colleagues had assembled. Tcherikower is also often remembered for his research on the notorious protocols of the Elders of Zion in the context of the Bern Trial of 1933 to 1935. He headed a group of historians, including Vladimir Burtsev and Sergei Svatakov, who gathered evidence and gave testimony for the prosecution concerning the fraudulent nature of the protocols. In 1939, Tcherikower, then living in France, co-edited with Yisrael African the new Yiddish-language journal Oyfn Shadvej, with Zelig Kalmanovich as a major contributor. The three colleagues, who had all advocated for diaspora nationalism and Yiddishism, aimed to re-evaluate their cultural and political views on the future of the Jewish people. When the Germans invaded France in June 1940, Tcherikower and his wife fled the Paris apartment and headed for the south of France. They eventually managed to obtain visas with the help of the American branch of YIVO and emigrated to the United States in September 1940. Settling in New York City, Tcherikower had continued to chair the historical section of YIVO until 1939, and after his arrival in New York he served as the section's research secretary at YIVO's new headquarters there. He died in New York City in 1943. Personal life. Tcherikower's wife Rebecca Tcherikower was his life partner from the time of his youth. They married around 1910. After the couple settled in New York City, in 1940, Rebecca Tcherikower worked as an archivist at the new YIVO headquarters. She died in New York on July 7, 1963. Works in English Jewish Martyrology and Jewish Historiography. YIVO Annual of Jewish Social Science, Volume 1, p. 9-23. In Yiddish, Antisemitism und Pogromen in Ukraine in die Jahren 1917–1918. Berlin, Jiddische Literarische Verlag, 1923. Die Ukrainer Pogromen in Jahr 1919. New York.